And this report is coming from our colleague, and literally our colleague, because she is here with us. Now she works as a senior lecturer at Tomsk State University at the Faculty of Philosophy, Department of Social Work. This is Jean Kollantai. She's from the United States originally, and now she's dealing with the issues of academic writing, because we have a lot of people who have to write and publish internationally, and she has helped a lot of them already, and she is continuing to do that. And I want to present the topic of the report. Comments by an American semi-digital nomad in Siberia. Please, dear Jean.
Thank you, Snezhana, and I'm glad to be here, and thank you for all your efforts in organizing this. And I hope that I have the advantage technologically of being actually present here in the room, so that will be nice. And my talk is a little bit different. I've been asked to make some comments on my experience here as, I guess you could call it, a semi-digital nomad, a digital semi-nomad. Possibly I'm a super commuter, as Dr. Long spoke about. But for the past 3 years, I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, okay, in the U.S. And for the past 3 years, I have worked here at Tomsk State University in this building in the philosophy faculty, helping, as Snezhana said, to work with academic English, academic writing for publication. And so I've really been, for like 3 years now, and I'll be back next year, I've been using technology to lead this kind of double life. Okay, I'm not a complete nomad, but I have this double life, and the double life is connected and kind of enabled by technology. And I also have another life that I lead while I'm doing this, because I have a nonprofit organization that I founded many years ago, before the internet. And this group continues. And so while I am here, I'm also directing a nonprofit organization of people who are actually around the world, in the US, Canada, but also around the world. So while I am here in Tomsk for 9 months of the year, I still participate in my life in Alaska, okay? I can take care of my various business. I talk with my friends, my family. I can talk with my bank, you know, if I want to, if I need to, anything like that. And I can do that really the same way that I would do it there at home, because if my friends or family members don't happen to live in Anchorage, we're talking by Skype anyway. So I can talk to them all. There's no cost to doing this. My Skype balance hasn't even changed in the last 8 or 9 months. It somehow just stays the same. And so I'm able to carry on. I can even go online and see if my house is locked or not in Anchorage. Okay, is it locked? And I'm able to do things like I vote here when there are city, state, or national elections in the US. I vote online, and I was here as an intern also the year before I came here to work. And so in the presidential elections, the US presidential elections of 2012, people here watched me vote for president of the US before I sent it in. So I can take care of and be connected to all those things without any real difficulty. When I am in Anchorage during the summer, as I will be now in another month or so, it's actually pretty easy for me to continue to work with some people here by Skype, by email. And in fact, even when I am here, I work with some people by Skype and email, because there may be people who are connected with TSU, but they're working in Europe or other places. They're in some programs, or just maybe more convenient. So even when I'm here, we're doing some things by Skype and email, but I can do that when I am, you see the English language articles on the TSU website, okay? Well, I polish those articles, and I do that in the summer in Anchorage, just as I would do here during the year. So I'm still doing work. I can talk with people here or do anything. There's a 15-hour time difference between Alaska and Tomsk, okay? So that gets interesting for Skyping and for some other things, but we always manage to kind of work that out. Sometimes we have to decide what day it is or something, like with Australia, but it always works out. Also, I can organize my classes when it comes to be August and September. I can organize everything here ahead of time, and when I come back to my office up there, I can go right into meetings. I'm interviewing my students. We're doing everything because I can work with people and organize everything before I'm even back. So I can come back into this part of my double life with no real gap. There isn't some big like physical, mental gap in between the two. Also, there is the, I don't do Instagram much and I don't Twitter, but the magic of Facebook is also real. I still call it the magic. Makes it possible to communicate with most of my friends and relatives and colleagues. It really doesn't matter where we are, what time it is, or whatever. It doesn't matter where I'm working. We can just communicate. There is someone from here who just now, 2 weeks ago, went to the U.S., to Washington, D.C. for a one-year internship in her field, someone who is a good friend and colleague of mine. And actually, it's really not that much different now. We can Facebook each other. We just communicate about anything that we want to or need to. And it doesn't really make that much difference that she is there and I'm here in many respects. Of course, it's not completely the same. A so-called secret group on Facebook is also an important element of the nonprofit support group that I direct. And it's called the Center for Loss and Multiple Birth, people who've had loss in twin and higher multiple pregnancies and birth. I founded it in 1987 when everything was strictly pencil and paper, photocopying, postal mailing, telephone. This was an extreme challenge. The group grew, unfortunately, sadly, the group grew to include hundreds and hundreds of people, and we're doing this all the old way. We did not have the internet and email. And the group includes, as I mentioned, hundreds of members in the US, Canada, other countries around the world. Since about 2000, we have been able to operate mainly through the internet. By choice, we don't do it entirely that way. We leave it open also to people who are not on the internet. We do some things in print, but primarily through the internet. And this has been very useful in general, and it's really been useful to me while being here because I can do this group and respond to people and do things just as if I were in the US, and no one really knows the difference. I don't even need to tell them where I am. So, for example, last week I had an email letter from a woman in South Africa who very much needs support. And she began her letter, I live in South Africa and I hope it's okay if I write. And she was thinking that she was writing Alaska, which used to be a big deal for people to call Alaska, to send a letter to Alaska. It was really huge for Americans. This was big. So she was thinking that she was emailing Alaska or the US from South Africa. But I could write back. I wrote back and said, oh, of course it is, you know, which is true. And I didn't even need to say, oh, by the way, of course it is, because I'm in Siberia. You know, I didn't need to say that. I probably will mention it to her in the future, but I wanted to keep the focus on her needs. And I was able to put her in touch with a woman in Canada who had a similar situation. She had read, the woman in South Africa had read the personal story of the woman in Canada on our electronic newsletter and asked if she could be in touch with her, and of course she could. So we were doing like South Africa, Siberia to Canada, and there was no real difference in anything. And we could have all been in Texas, you know. And to some people this would seem normal now, but to those of us who know what it was like to deal with things before all these things were possible, it was quite interesting. And it gives me the kind of mobility that I need to be able to do my life and still honor these commitments and these works that I've made. I have to say that my internet service here is better than what I have in Anchorage. It's really true. And there have been no difficulties for me in being connected here. I don't have a smartphone yet, so I can't tell you, I can't speak to that. But as far as being connected, it's really been better here. Tomsk has been a very comfortable place to live my double life. Actually, that's why I keep coming back, you know. And I can see how Siberia in general could be appealing to digital nomads, semi-nomads, especially urban digital nomads. I could see how some of that might work. But my background is as a social worker. As you might have guessed, my background is as a social worker. And as a social worker, I tend to focus on practical things and practical issues. And I could see that there would be, and our speakers have actually already alluded to them already, there are some practical considerations involved, even for people who are doing this by choice, you know, professionally. There are things like visas and tax laws, language in some settings, living in countries with other languages, handling money and banking securely, all that sort of thing. I've spoken to some people too. I've known a few people who've been digital nomads, and they raise these kinds of issues. There are a lot of these practical things that you have to pay attention to. In this country, it's very, as you well know, it's very important that each person be registered to a physical address at all times and have your document that you are registered. This isn't the case, you know, in many other countries, and this would be difficult for digital nomads. Having the registration system could be difficult depending on what their situation was. In some countries, and I had this, a colleague, this happened to her some years ago, you have to be careful about earning money in a country that you have a tourist visa. And I know someone who had to leave Australia for 2 years because someone insisted on paying her a small stipend for a talk, and then that completely upset the visa. So there are things like that. I suspect that the laws and practices of many countries, and as she said, that things are in many ways still so much done by countries in this world, some of the laws and practices haven't yet caught up with some of what the realities would be for people living and working in this way. And so people who are digital nomads would have to be somewhat knowledgeable. I have to be aware of tax laws in both countries, for example. Things like that you have to do, depending on the situation. And I suspect that digital nomadism isn't quite as free as the name connotes. There are these things to consider. There are also, and as she alluded to, there's war and conflict, climate and climate change. There are many realities affecting life and travel, even for people who are able to do this kind of thing by choice and not as refugees. There are still many realities that impact what people can do and how they can do it. But I think that this trend is very promising for those who can do it. and I feel that I've been very fortunate to have my own small modified version of it between Siberia and Alaska in the last few years. So thank you very much again. And,
thank you very much. Thank you. You know, it's not an anecdote. About 2 or 3 years ago, we were I don't remember where we were. That was a conference, some international conference in Europe, and we were actually asked a question: do you even have the internet in Siberia? We go, well, you know, we kind of do. It's very nice to hear that you think that our place here might be appealing. Yes, we have some issues. Unfortunately, we are not the ones who can somehow help the situation, no, somehow change the situation. But still, we have hope at least.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Sophia.
Well, thank you first of all for your report. It was pretty interesting, and I'm curious. You told that you have such difficulties with doing this double life from Alaska and Siberia. And what was the most difficult, like paperwork or time management or media connections with your colleagues? And what was the most fun part of your experience? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I feel like I've had amazingly few difficulties, actually, thanks to technology and thanks to how good things are here in so many ways. I don't feel that any one thing has been especially difficult. I will admit that the visa system can be, you know, I'm not used to, as an American, I'm not used to dealing with visas quite as much, so I have to admit that there were times when I was, you know, taking blood tests and waiting for visas, that sort of thing, you know. But in general, there really haven't been any difficulties, and I've been amazed how I can like kind of go back and forth between the lives and also get them to connect, to be able to live one life while being in the other has actually been quite good. And part of the fun actually is being able to do that, you know, and to not feel, and this reminded me very much of Dr. Chen's talk and also Dr. von Berg's, in some ways, not to have to find your identity by being completely in one place, one language, that sort of thing, but to be able to live and work in a more flexible way in these kind of multiple places and multiple dimensions that might be in person, might be through technology, or both in the case of this morning. Languages also, that's another story. I don't speak Russian fluently, but I speak Russian and read it to some extent. So being able to be more flexible and working between languages has been a big plus for me. And yeah, it's hard to define it, but it's like having this different perspective on life by not being only having everything tied to one place. And but actually the best thing here, if I may say, has been the people, and just the amazing people, and what everyone at the university is doing and trying to do. And yeah, I could go on about that, but that's what sort of keeps me coming back.
We would listen a little bit more about that, of course, too. But yes, we are. We have to move on. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your contribution, for your time, and for your attention, of course. And we hope that maybe you can spend a little bit more time with us here. Thank you.